Hello and welcome to episode 10 of the Rogue Health Economist livecast. I'm super excited to be here today. We are going to be talking about immunity. It's Immunity Week here at the Rogue Health Economist, and I'm super excited for the first time on the Rogue Health Economist to actually introduce one of our health advocates from Fine Functional. Last week, I introduced you to this new concept, Fine Functional, and I'm going to introduce you to a new concept again today, which is the idea of a health advocate. You've probably heard of a patient advocate, someone that helps people advocate and make their way through through the healthcare system. You've probably heard of a health coach. Well, those two things together are, I believe, a really important part of the future of medicine. And I've come to believe that because of people like my guest here today. Welcome to the Rogue Health Economist, Christina Tidwell. Welcome, Christina.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, it's great to have you here, and I really appreciate, I've learned so much from our friendship over the years, and I'm just super excited to share some of these concepts here with the community and some of how we sort of came to this conclusion. So let's just start with the story. I'd love to just everyone to know what your background is and how you ended up doing the job that you do today.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm Christina Tidwell. I am a registered nurse and a functional nutrition coach as well. And I work with clients in my own practice to really help people with chronic illness and chronic autoimmune disease take control of their health using things like nutrition, lifestyle shifts, and most importantly, personal empowerment or advocacy really has been a really important part of what I do and what I've done as a nurse as well. And a lot of what led me to where I am today is really my own personal experience with chronic illness, which I think a lot of us that are in this field, that is the case. But for me, personally, when I was 18 years old, I got really, really sick. And I was previously really healthy kid, like playing lots of sports and didn't have any medical history or anything. I mean, now having done my functional timeline and understanding, I see some things, but previously really healthy. And I got what felt just like a really bad flu. And I just kept going and thinking like, man, this is really bad flu. And it came with really bad chills, high spiking fevers to 104, these sweats, this overall huge inflammatory response in my body. And I just had no clue what was going on. And one night I went to bed. This was all my senior year of high school. And one night I went to bed and I woke up in the middle of the night and I had this excruciating pain in my back and I couldn't breathe. And I remember grabbing my landline phone in my room and calling my parents down the hall and saying like, something's really wrong. I can't breathe. So they took me to the hospital and it turned out that I had a pulmonary embolism or a blood clot in my lung that was making it hard for me to breathe. And now knowing that that was in part from taking hormonal birth control, but also because of this huge immune and inflammatory response that was going on in my body. So I ended up in the hospital for about 3 weeks trying to figure out what the heck was going on and was tested for like every infectious disease, all of these different things. And when I came out of the hospital, I was given an initial diagnosis of juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, which then changed, and I never had any joint pain, and that changed to something called adult onset Still's disease. Basically, kind of not knowing exactly what category I fit into, but having this huge immune and autoimmune response in my body. So upon being discharged from the hospital, that really started this whole journey for me. And in my head then, I was used to the model of one problem, one doctor, one solution. And so when I was going through all of this and that wasn't working for me and wasn't happening for me, I really started to kind of delve into what could I do? What else is going on here? And no one around me, any of my peers, were dealing with anything similar at the time. And speaking of advocacy, for me, a big turning point was probably a year after this initial diagnosis and the onset of my symptoms. I had gone to my rheumatologist's office, and instead of seeing my rheumatologist that day, I saw a nurse practitioner. And she listened to my whole story that I told, and she stopped and said, wow, Christina, that's a lot. Like, you've gone through a lot. How are you doing? And that question absolutely floored me, because I promise it was the first time that someone had asked me that in this whole course of what was going on. And so what it did was really open up the doors for me to understanding that I had a role in my care, and that I could say, well, no, this medication's making me feel horrible, and I still feel really achy. I'm so tired. I'm really anxious. Like, I could tell her these things, and it made a difference. So the gift that she gave me was really understanding that I had a little bit of power and control in this whole situation. And I took that and ran with it, really. All I needed was someone to help me and help me see that, because I didn't know that. And so I became a nurse because of her influence, really, and because I wanted to help people who were going through something similar to myself. And I worked in intensive care. I worked in long-term patient rehab, palliative care. I floated. Most recently, I was a cardiac specialist nurse, so I worked in an outpatient clinic interpreting stress EKGs. And so I've done a lot of different things, and working in that area, I really saw how I felt really called to supporting people in sort of these gaps that I was finding in people dealing with longer term chronic illness and chronic health issues. And so I ended up becoming a health coach and doing more study into functional nutrition and doing the work that I do now. But it's definitely been an evolution of learning as a patient myself, and then as a practitioner in this system too.
Yeah, so tell us about your health today.
Yes, I'm doing great, but it's been a really long journey. It's been like a 15-year journey, and it really started out then. Like I said, I got a little bit of that permission that I had control over my health, but at the time I wasn't given any other tools, really. The tools that I had were high dose prednisone, some DMARDs, and some like biologic drugs, and I didn't really have any other tools. So for me, it was a really individual journey at first. I started experimenting with food and just kind of looking into more holistic health. And then a bit later down the line, I ended up seeing a nutritionist who was affiliated with my rheumatologist at the time. And she was really, really helpful. And one of my first forays into the world of, holistic health. And so she helped me identify different gut issues and experiment with different, healing diets and different foods, which was really, really, really helpful. And so from there, it's been, I've done a number of different things and really worked to support my body and health. But where I am now is I feel great, and I'm not on any medications now, and I have been on and off for a long periods of time to figure this out. But I have come to a place where I really deeply know myself and my body, and that doesn't mean that I'm magically perfectly healthy all the time, but that I know so deeply what works for me and what doesn't, and I can care for myself in a way that I feel really confident in. So that's been one of the most important pieces.
Amazing. So, yeah, this podcast is called The Rogue Health Economist because, like, I witnessed transformations like you've had, being happening at the clinic that I worked in, and then working with other practitioners. And I just realized, like, okay, this is the way that we need to, scale this up. So, I guess just to give some context, like, had that nurse not asked you that, and you had still to this day been in the old way of thinking of just like that someone's going to solve you, what does your health trajectory look like in the next 15 years? And what does your cost look like in the next 15 years?
Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, if I hadn't started to understand that I had some control, I had some power, and that there were things I could do on a daily basis, I would not be in a good place. I do not know where I would be, because my only tools, like I said, since I had been given a diagnosis, it was the messaging that I was kind of getting was, I'm really sorry that you got this diagnosis, but this is just kind of how it is for you. And I'm really sorry. And I just knew that couldn't be true, like so many of us. And so if I didn't have that, my only tools really were prednisone and biologic drugs, which did really help me for periods of my life. Like really, I needed them. But I got to a place where I knew I didn't need them, and there was so much more. So I do not know where I would be. I would not be in a good place. I would not be doing what I would be doing now. I would be really, really sick because of all the work that I have done. And that trajectory, I do see a lot of clients who get to that place, who haven't gotten that empowerment, or who haven't started to understand that they play a really critical and important role in their healing. Simply, it's not their fault or anything. It's just kind of how our system is set up a little bit in this, one problem, one doctor, one solution. And if that solution doesn't make you better, something's wrong with you. It's not something's wrong with the tool. So for a while, I felt like something must be wrong with me, because they gave me a diagnosis and they gave me a medicine and it didn't work.
Yeah.
And so it's really kind of flipping that. And I have seen a lot of clients who have gone a long ways without having that knowledge. And it really is a process of learning or remembering that we have so much more power than we think.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to just dive into that, because I love that. So on Instagram, I love, the stuff that you post. And one of the things you posted a couple of weeks ago was just that this first step had for you to be your own advocate. And one of the reasons why we set up Find Functional the way that we did is because we want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to go through that journey. But it's not easy to go through that journey. It's not like an intuitive process in the current health system. And so it's like, we can provide you with your health advocate on your journey to becoming your own health advocate. And I'd love for you just to talk into that a little bit.
Yeah, I really do believe it is the number one thing we have to do, because like I said, if I didn't get that little opening from that practitioner who told me, like, well, how are you feeling? Does this work for you? What do you think about this? I didn't know that my health was any of my business. Really, I thought, oh, I just have to do what the doctors tell me and it will work. When it comes to really acute health issues, that can work sometimes. But what we know is that when we're dealing with longer term chronic health issues, that doesn't work. We're the only person that has all of this valuable information about ourselves. And so that's why tools like the functional timeline or functional matrix, is so important, because we gather all of that information about you and your health history to put it in order in a way that makes sense and in a way that you can understand. So I think, beyond anything else, first understanding that we are our own advocate, and that we do, our voices really do matter. And so I always envision that as us being positioned at the center of a care team. So there are people around you, but remembering that you're really at the center of that is going to help with every intervention, everything else that you do. And you're right that sometimes we can't be our own advocate. And sometimes it's because we are really sick and we're really tired and our brain is foggy and we can't do that. And sometimes we just don't know exactly what to do. And the healthcare system can be quite intimidating. And a lot of times, talking about like different gaps, there's definitely a trust gap. A lot of us that have dealt with chronic health issues over time may have had really strained relationships in the conventional medical system and might have lost some trust. If we've gone along and that system isn't able to help us, we start to feel like, okay, well, maybe this is my fault, or nobody's listening to me and I have something to say, like I have information. So losing that trust sometimes, it can mean that we maybe don't feel like we can be our own advocate. So a big part of my work when I was working as a nurse was to really help people understand that and to be an advocate for themselves, because you absolutely need to when you're moving through the healthcare system. But then again, even when we're working in a more functional holistic system, to also understand the importance of your, being empowered, really being empowered to take control of your health.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love that. Would you say, like, my feeling, having just listened to other people, is that maybe like the health system for someone like you is not just like there's a lack of trust, but it maybe is even like traumatic?
Yes.
Trauma inducing.
Yeah. I've spoken to just so many people over the years through my social media, through my clients, through my calls. And it really can be quite a traumatic thing, because you go into the experience, like I said, with the idea, oh, one problem, I'm going to go to the doctor, I'm going to get my solution and done with it. And we realize that that's really not how it works. We're far more complex than that. And so it can really be very traumatic when we go in and talk about our symptoms of fatigue or brain fog or digestive issues, and we're told, I mean, maybe you just need to sleep more, or, let's just wait till things get worse, like your labs look okay, or it can be very not validating sometimes. And this isn't always, the case, but it's definitely common in people that I've spoken to. And so, we can definitely feel a little bit traumatized with that experience if we're not seen, we're not heard, and we're not really cared for in the deeper holistic way that we need to be if we're dealing with chronic illness, or even not chronic illness, like just as a human.
Yeah, I think that's so critical. Okay, well, look, now let's dive in a little bit into, like you said, you've been trained in functional nutrition, and I want to dive into that because, like, ultimately, I think in a theoretical framework, right, functional medicine and the autoimmune disease that you experience is a perfect match, right? Where there's an operating system of medicine that comes together to solve that. And certainly we do see autoimmune disease being reversed in functional medicine doctors' offices, but I think also, like, that isn't always the case, and that there are issues that are even that are happening in functional medicine doctors' offices or functional medicine clinics that are maybe either delaying people in getting better, or maybe making people pay over the odds to get better, or maybe people not having as consistent experience. And I know you've communicated that to me, and other people have, like Andrea Nakayama, who I know you work with. There's sort of like a gap, and I'd just love for you to talk into a little bit to sort of help understand, like, what is the gap in functional medicine and who can fill it?
Yes. So I think firstly, like, a lot of why functional or holistic practitioners go into the field is because there's been a gap in the conventional system, right? We see that as a gap and we want to fill that gap. And it's such an important gap to be filled. And I'm so glad, like, when I found functional medicine, I was like, but then after having worked in my scope as a health coach with clients for the last 5 years, and doing training with Andrea Nakayama, who is wonderful and really helps to see these different paradigms. But I've come to see that there is another gap too, and it's one I've been working to fill in the functional medicine realm. And so what that kind of looks like is, like, at first I felt like I was seeing a lot of clients that had a lot of complex health issues, but hadn't yet tried a lot of different holistic approaches. And that's still the case with a number of people. But what I'm seeing a lot of now is people that have complex health issues and have tried a ton of different things, but they're still not feeling well and they're not getting better. And it can feel confusing at first, like, what, you've done all these things, you've seen all these functional medicine practitioners, and here you are. And I'll give an example of a client to kind of like talk through what this gap looks like a little bit. But I was working with a client who had gone to see a functional medicine practitioner who's very, very busy, like pretty well-known practitioner, and had gotten, a lot of different tests, really thorough workup, like the most amazing workup of all time, and left with a protocol that was literally like 7 pages. She had sent it to me. And so she got all this great information. She ended up, Lyme disease was part of her story, so she ended up having to go to another state to get some specialized treatment for it, where she was by herself. She wasn't with family and friends. She became really fearful, really stressed out. She wasn't able to communicate in between the sessions. Like, she just didn't feel like she had as much support in between sessions, because it was a really busy practice. And so she ended up feeling like maybe it helped her a little bit, but just feeling really stuck. And it was kind of this gap that I was seeing. So she came to me just basically saying, I think I need some help putting this in place because I think something's wrong with me that I can't do it. Like it's just too much for me, and I've had this amazing workup and I feel like I can't do it. And so her protocol was like I said, amazing, but it was things like, okay, try this healing diet, then here's your SIBO protocol, then after 2 weeks do this diet, then here's your liver detox and cleanse, then we want you to meditate every day, get this amount of exercise every day, and then check in with us in 2 months. And so some people might be like, yes, this is it, give me all the things, I'm going to run with it. But what I've been finding is a lot of people, and for this woman in particular, she froze in inaction and was so overwhelmed with all of these pieces because there was a big knowledge gap. She didn't feel like she had the skills to put these things into place. So like cutting out gluten might have been a big thing for her, and she had a really big list of things to do. When she wasn't able to put them all into place, she felt really guilty, and she was afraid to go back to the practitioner not having done everything. And she, because of cost, because it was a very quite pricey visit, there was an appointment gap too. So she had this big time in between the appointments where she felt really lost. So for her, what this looked like was kind of just freezing and not doing anything. And she just felt like she couldn't move forward. And so when she came to me, what she really wanted was just help and guidance to move through this in a way that felt sustainable and that felt easy, and to just kind of fill this gap. She was getting really amazing support, and she just needed help in this gap. And for her, that was everything. It was, what I see and what I find a lot is we can have all the information in the world, but if we can't put it into place in a way that's doable in our lives and that feels good and sustainable, then it's really, really hard to build this strong foundation of health. And clients find sometimes that they might like try an intervention, fall off, try something, fall off. And then we get in our heads like, well, nothing works for me, I'm broken. Like I've had these thoughts too, myself, moving through all of this, when really nothing's wrong with you or anyone, but it's really just needing that guidance and support to make these things doable and realistic in your life to actually have change and move the needle.
Absolutely. Yeah, I guess what I've seen over the last few years is that the best clinics out there would sort of start people on behavior change because that has to be like a foundation for everything else. And, you would see such significant like transformations in people's physiology and then reflected in lab tests that, that maybe doing all the testing at the beginning wasn't necessarily the best thing because people would get better and better. And then it would make sense to do it or not. And that really struck into me when I saw what they were doing at the Cleveland Clinic, where now you had to go through this like 10-week process to, to learn how to take care of yourself basically, and learn to sleep and learn to meditate and learn to read your own labs. And it was like this whole 10-week empowerment process in a group structure. And I just realized like, oh, wow, every clinic should probably be doing this. And yet, most clinics just keep doing what they're doing because it's like, it's working and people keep paying. And, there's such a, like, the demand and supply of functional medicine is so off kilter. And so, you can just keep going. And ultimately that's kind of what led to Find Functional, because I was like, look, why don't we just do this? We'll set it up in the right in the right way so that we can do the right things in the right order and use the doctors when they're needed. Because like you said, that workup was amazing. And the fact that someone could do it, but it's like, can this person actually execute this plan? And I think, one of the things that you said to me that really stuck with me is people feel like being healthy is a full-time job. And I just know that that's true. Like I know that from seeing clinics, working with clinic, my business partner, Gabe, who I had, when I first met him, he was a health coach inside a functional medicine doctor's office. And we had hours and hours of conversations, throughout the 10 years that we worked together, where he would say exactly this. He said, look, people already have a huge list of things that they know they're doing that they shouldn't be doing. Like, drinking Diet Coke, like it's their little habit and they know they shouldn't do it. They know it's bad for them, but they do it anyway. Like, why would you pay for the $800 like gut test when you're still drinking Diet Coke? Because it's throwing the gut bugs out. And, it's like, let's get these things in the right order. And so, ultimately, I recognize that the gap is real. I recognize that, someone like yourself is in a great position to fill the gap. One, because you understand functional medicine, you understand functional nutrition, you speak the language, you've been there yourself. And I feel like what I really started to feel was like, everyone kind of needs, if you're going to reverse your chronic illness, you need a best friend who's already done it. Right. And it's less than like a health professional, but it's more like a best friend. And what does a best friend do to you? They like have enough empathy to help you to do the things that you want to do. But then they also, can advocate for you because they're your friend and they know that it's hard to be you. And so they can go and make phone calls on your behalf and kind of hustle a little bit. And that's kind of where this idea of the health advocate came from, because I just realized, like, from hearing so many conversations and listening to practitioners all the time, that this is kind of where the gap is. So there's like, in one situation, I can imagine where someone starts with the health advocate, works on their health, on the fundamentals, and then gets better and doesn't need to go to the doctor. In some places where they go then and get transitioned to the doctor that has all of that stuff, and then they're good. Or goes to see the doctor, gets a more involved protocol and keeps working to implement it. But in all three of those cases, the foundation has to be delivered first. And in a lot of cases, like, that can't happen in a medical facility, because in order to establish as a patient, you have to see the doctor, and, the cost just, goes up in that direction. So those are part of the reasons. I mean, let's just get into it. Like, when you've worked with people without lab testing, right, without aggressive supplementation, and worked on things, like, what kind of things are possible with that kind of approach? And what have you seen in your practice with the people that you've worked with?
Yes, and yes to everything you just said. Like, there's so many different ways to kind of do it. But when I work with people, I mean, I start out by doing a deep assessment. We do a functional timeline. We do a functional matrix. We look at the antecedents, triggers, mediators. We do food symptom journaling. We look at all these things, and really from there start to put in pieces step by step that help people to actually move the needle and create this thicker baseline. So, like, for example, I had a client who was a young girl in her 20s who had endometriosis and was experiencing a lot of anxiety, and had done all the things, like, done everything. And some things had really helped her. She was on a huge list of supplements, had done a lot of different testing. But what became evidently clear for her, and she was still in a lot of pain. She had to drop out of a semester of college because she just couldn't handle it. And this was a prime example of her health started to feel like a full-time job. From when she woke up in the morning, it was like, it was her job. It was taking up all of her brain space to the point where she couldn't go to school. So when I saw her, she really wanted to know, well, what's the next thing? What's the next supplement? What test should I do? Right? Because we all just want to feel better. And like, any way that we can do that, we want to. And so what I did was kind of just like back it up and really look and see, like, are you sleeping? Are you balancing your blood sugar? What are your energy levels like? What are your hormones telling us? Are you going to the bathroom every day? And it really, what we were able to uncover was that anxiety and stress around all of this was one of the biggest drivers, mediators, if you will, of her symptoms. And so I didn't need an adrenal test to tell me she was wildly stressed out. Like, I didn't need that. That can be helpful to know exactly what your adrenals are doing, but I don't need that, And so we started to basically just have time and space to talk about all the fears that she had around food, because she'd been on a really restricted diet and was supposed to continue with that, but was so afraid of eating anything that she was down to like 5 foods. So ultimately I, helped to guide her understand, really to tune in to there's a lot of external rules that we pick up along the way through different practitioners, from reading social media, seeing what people did on the internet. And so a lot of this was getting rid of some of these rules, tuning back into her body and understanding what was true for her. So really just saying, how are you feeling right now? What does your body need? And can we give you that? Really, so that is a muscle that needs to be strengthened. So working through all of these pieces step by step, we were able to give her a lot of tools to support her stress, to understand how to breathe, to understand her triggers and signals for when her body was getting really tense and worked up, and to just have practices and routines and a toolkit in the day that she could pull from, really softened and loosened a bit around her diet and understood how can we bulk up diversity and more foods, and in fact to support your microbiome, because what was happening was kind of the opposite. Really looking too at beliefs and mindset, because a lot of people who have dealt with chronic health issues for a long time have a lot of underlying beliefs that they're broken, that they can't be fixed, that nothing works for them. So if you are doing all of these higher level tier 3 interventions, but you still have a belief that nothing works for you, that doesn't fit together well. So working through all of these pieces, and also I worked with her and her mom too, to kind of understand how they could best support each other through this. And just through all of this, her anxiety got so much better. She was able to sleep through the night. She could eat more foods, and she wasn't as afraid of this. She worked a lot on her mindset and like who she was as a person. And we were able to support her digestive process from top to bottom, which had a big ripple effect on everything else. And so she was able to go back to school. Actually, last semester, like before all this stuff happened, she was able to go back to school, live on her own, have more freedom. She had all these tools. Like, we still have check-ins, but they're fewer and far between because she knows what to do, right? She got that empowerment. And for me, it was so cool because she's in her 20s and she's learned this, right? That she has control and she has the power. And the amount of times she would ask me something and I'd say, well, I don't know, how does that make you feel? She started to learn that. And so for me, her story was so cool because we didn't order a single test. She had a lot of things done. I looked at some of her regular labs, but we didn't need that, you know? And so she had these huge health outcomes, and it really just like got her unstuck. She was stuck in this place and thought that what she needed was maybe more testing or like the one thing, but really understood how we were able to kind of shift the terrain in her body and her life, and then build this really strong, thick baseline so that she was able to move through her life, go to school, do all of these things, and just like live her life, really.
So what is your process for helping people develop that strong baseline? You said something earlier, which I love, which is like, this is a muscle that needs to be strengthened. And I feel like in Western medicine and in like, you know, sort of like the functional medicine you described earlier, there's no real muscle being built because it's like a very one-off intervention, and there's certainly nothing expected of the patient and not a process that's going through. And I guess when I hear about the Cleveland Clinic, you know, sort of functioning for life process where people are going through 10 weeks, and it sounds like from your case right there, there's a muscle that's being built. And I really think that's such an important piece, because I feel like the scaling up of people building their own muscle is like the only way out of this health crisis, from an economics point of view, from a personal point of view, from like, you know, a humanity point of view. And so I'm just like obsessed with trying to work out how we can do this at a reasonable scale. And I'd love to just, you know, hear from you what you think are the sort of common factors and what is necessary to help people build the muscle, and how can we help people build that as quickly and as efficiently as possible.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of different ways and things. I think the first thing that I think about when I'm working with people is strengthening the muscle of tuning into your body, because we are conditioned for a really long time to tune out, especially in like diet culture or, you know, anything. We're conditioned to just follow an external set of rules and say, well, if I do that, then I should be healthy. That should work out. And what I find is that the muscle that can kind of atrophy over time is really this muscle of tuning into our body, tuning in. And it sounds kind of vague, but it really is just understanding at any given moment. There's 3 questions I always have my clients ask at the very beginning to figure out, like, what are their non-negotiables? What does their body need? And they're literally, how am I feeling? What do I need? And can I give myself that? So how am I feeling involves scanning into your body, not how should I be feeling, not how did I feel yesterday, just how am I feeling right now? And then the next piece is asking, what do I need? So you're able to tune into your body, and from that you're able to say, okay, well, what does my body need? And sometimes the answer is a nap. Like, that's what you need. Sometimes it's drinking water. You know, sometimes it's like a really nourishing meal or to balance my blood sugar or something. So what do I need? And then the third piece, can I give myself that? is huge, because a lot of times when this muscle is kind of weakened, we might know what we need, or we might be able to identify this, but actually being able to do it, to say, okay, I'm going to allow myself that 10 minutes of rest, or I'm going to give myself this big thing of water, or I'm going to, have snacks available for me so I know that my blood sugar won't dip too much, because that's a thing for me. So it's really like, it's as simple and as hard as those questions, and tuning into your body to understand what you need on any given moment, because that is what is going to help create more resilience and create this thicker baseline over time, is being able to fully understand what do you need and can you give yourself that. So that is where I start, because I find a lot of times, and especially with us women, sometimes other people are put first, and that muscle gets very, very weak in terms of being able to identify and understand that. So I really do find it is a process for people that we have to take them through. So that's where I always start.
Yeah, that sounds, I think that's really, really powerful. And I think that the building of that muscle is super critical, for everyone. And I see that that's not really taught anywhere, right? It's like in functional medicine, it's like, hey, that old plan was bad. Here's the new plan. And, it's still like some outward locus of control, right? Rather than the inside locus of control. And ultimately, I feel like this medicine, whatever its name is, in its purest form, is switching to an internal locus of control. And yet, it doesn't look like that every day in practice. And ultimately, my hope is that with Fine Functional, we can focus on that at the beginning, and we can take people through it. And part of my own thesis, and really from what I've seen out in the industry, is that the most affordable and scalable way to facilitate this is in a group, because it's just in the same way that like you do this one-on-one and you're like this kind of like big sister to them, helping them manage their way through it. Having other people in a group who have gone through that process, or who are going through that process, and seeing that kind of changes can inspire you, that muscle, to grow a lot more quicker, similar to like personal training versus CrossFit, right? Do you, like in CrossFit, you see all these other people getting great results and you keep coming back, and there's that like camaraderie. And I really feel like, well, that's why, that's what I learned from writing that book, is that muscle, that part of the world is so necessary. And yet in very, very few cases does anyone ever witness someone having a transformational effect. And ultimately, if you do witness that, like if someone in your family transforms, you want to know why. And then it's inspiring to you. These are these positive externalities that flow out. And ultimately, we need to start like really taking advantage of that, because it's the only inexhaustible resource in medicine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and some of the initial calls that are coming through for our Fine Functional calls, people are expressing that they want more community support. That's coming through on the ratings. I just had a look at some of them. So definitely in groups, feeling more empowered, and being able to come into a group. And when I come into groups for different things, different types of coaching, I come in and I get support on something I didn't even know I needed support on from hearing someone else, and so it's this really amazing way to just come together and help us all kind of strengthen these muscles, and also see that it's okay, that it's okay to take care of yourself, and that it is important to feel empowered, because a lot of times we kind of just take that back seat of, well, I'm not the doctor, right? So what do I have to do about this? But groups is a fantastic way to do that.
Absolutely. So look, you're busy, you have patients that come through, you've got amazing results, people come and see you. Like, why do you feel interested in being part of this project here at Fine Functional? What is it that drew you to it, and what do you think is its potential?
Yeah, well, so many things. I think, being able to fill this gap, right? Like, I'm just on a mission to bridge gaps and fill gaps. Like, that's just what I've been doing in my work up until now. And so I think that, your model of Fine Functional is a really perfect way to begin to fill this gap that we're seeing, so that we can come back to really practicing functionally, like really, really come back to that, and being able to bridge this gap, not only to help clients get way better outcomes, because honestly, sticking with the foundations, like if we try and skip over foundations, and I've personally done this myself so many times, like working as a nurse, and I was so stressed out, like drinking instant coffee, and I'm like, why is my fish oil and turmeric not working? I don't get it. But when we try and skip over these foundational pieces and just go straight to some of these tier 3 approaches and don't get the support, don't get the results that we need, we think something's wrong with us. But for me, when I'm coaching a client, if we need to spend 3 sessions on getting sleep right, that's what we do, because this is like tools for life. These are things that you can carry with you for life, and we don't skip over them just because there's something like maybe more exciting than sleep, because these are the things to help get you to where you want to go. So I think with Find Functional, being able to have that built in as a gap to support clients to get better outcomes, but also to support practitioners. Like I partner with different functional practitioners in Seattle, where I'm from, and it's really, really helpful for these practitioners to not have to spend an hour of their valuable time talking about what snacks to buy, or being able to delve deeper into limiting beliefs, which for me, all these pieces I love nothing more to guide people through these things. So it helps to get people ready almost for a functional practitioner visit, so they can get way more out of that. And they don't have to spend the time on some of these pieces that we've already worked on, and that outcomes are a lot better in that way, what I have seen. So I love how Find Functional bridges that. And I'm super excited to be a part of this and help coach in this model, because I hope it is something that also allows more people to access this type of care and medicine, really, because like you, I mean, I truly believe it is the way forward for us. And so if we can get more people and really establish these trusting partnerships, for people to feel really supported and feel really good and learn these tools that they can carry with them through the rest of their life, I think that it's a huge win, and it's going to have really big ripple effects. So I'm on board. I'm all about it.
Awesome. Well, look, thanks everyone for joining us here for the special live cast here at the Rogue Health Economist. This week is Immune Week, so we're going to be talking about autoimmune disease. We're going to be talking about immunity. Tomorrow, we're going to have the godfather of functional medicine, Dr. Jeffrey Bland, talking about this new, sort of new era of understanding what immunity is and immune resilience, and what's really happening, and how COVID is really setting up a moment where this is coming sharply into focus. But I guess I just wanted to showcase you, Christina, because I just feel like you perfectly encapsulate the sort of the feeling that I've seen, and, hosting 77 functional forums today, I've heard this so many times, and I just see that, like right now, when everything's broken, when primary care is broken, when functional medicine's kind of broken, when healthcare in general is broken, and there's like a moment to like just step in and say, look, this is the way that we should be doing it. I think it's a moment to just provide the kind of leadership that I think is needed in the industry. And, the leadership has really been delivered from people like yourself, people like Andrea, who's been, sort of, ringing this bell for a long time and saying, look, there's a gap here. We're not doing the fundamentals, and no one's trying to, no one's doing the wrong thing on purpose, but ultimately patients are being left behind, and it doesn't need to happen. And a lot of the things that we're talking about here are way cheaper than all the other stuff. And so, ultimately it's just like reorganizing things in a slightly different order, taking a step back. In some ways, it's actually similar to what you said with patients. Like, you get really excited about the different pieces, and you've tried all these different things. And I'm sure there's a lot of like functional medicine doctors that have tried all these different things on how to make a good practice. Then it's like just taking a step back and saying, hey, if we've got a moment now to just breathe, and a moment to think about how should we like set things up, and in what order should we be running these kind of things, I think that you can learn from the best practices to see that lifestyle first has to be a foundation, like honoring people's trauma, and honoring, you know, the fact that there's not an unlimited amount of money for people to be able to go, and doing the least costly, least invasive things first, and making our way up towards tier 3 interventions if they're needed at all, and ultimately, you know, if you do this first part right, you can reduce the need for that massively. Like, that is just intuitive. It makes sense. It makes economic sense. It makes human sense. It makes individual sense. And so I'm really excited to be going on this journey with you. I really appreciate, you know, all of the things that you've done to make this incredible experience. And for those of you who are listening, like, if you want to get involved, you can go to findfunctional.com. You can get started for as little as $49, less than a copay on your functional medicine journey. And we're super excited. Later this week, tomorrow, we're going to hear from Dr. Jeffrey Bland. And later this week, we're going to be introducing our virtual group visit offering called the Immune Collaborative. That is going to be a way for groups of people to get themselves and support themselves in getting well. I really think it's an idea whose time has come, and we will see. So thanks for tuning into the Rogue Health Economist. We're here every weekday at 12 o'clock. We'll be taking all these videos and putting them everywhere else for you to see. But thank you. Check out Christina Tidwell at her website. She is helping us here at Find Functional create this incredible system. She will be taking groups of people through the Immune Collaborative too. So if you want to get signed up with Christina, you can come and join here. And the best thing to do is to get started. But thanks so much for watching. We'll see you same time, same place tomorrow. Thanks, Christina, for being on. And we'll see you next time.
See ya.